Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast. After a bit of a hiatus for some reason, I'm back as your host this week, Ashwin, and we have a full house. We have Varun in Singapore, DJ in London, and it is a pretty exciting time in the world of cricket. It feels like suddenly the IPL disappeared from our lives. We were left with a little bit of a void. But Varun, I'm going to come to you first, right? The World Test Championship Final, the first ever World Test Championship Final, is just over a week away. I mean, let's talk a little bit about the journey on getting here, right? Like, do you remember what it felt like for you when the announcement happened that, hey, test matches are not going to be bilateral series only anymore and are now going to have significance and a points table? And how does it feel from that journey where we started, again, like this is something that started in our adult lives, right? So how does it feel to be on the cusp of the first ever final?
Yeah, I mean, as Shastri and Kohli say, it's the pinnacle of all events, which I personally don't think so, but they seem to be really, really like pumped up about this. But it's been interesting because I think they announced it 2 years ago that there's a 2-year cycle. At that point, I remember reading it. We didn't quite understand what this is going to look like. They had a lot of debate around the point system, home and away, number of series. Then COVID kicked in and they changed it to percentage number of points for win. A lot of people saying England or Australia should have been in this final instead of New Zealand. Of course, we got teams, bowled out within 2.5 days in Chepauk and made our way straight to Southampton. So it's been a very good journey so far.
Yeah, great to mention the Chepauk wins and not mention the Gabba or anything, right? But DJ, let me quickly ask you before we get into more details. India's team number 1 as the top of the table. New Zealand is team number 2. All the noise, all the COVID, this, and Australia missed by 0.8% and all that. Is that a fair result? Like, are those the right two teams to be going to the finals?
I mean, cricket's a game where if you edge the ball and it goes down to the boundary, it's still counted as 4. So any Kiwi who's told by the Australians you don't deserve to be in the final should say, look in the scoreboard, man. That's all. It's all in the scorebook. It's in the table. That's it. You're playing the first ever World Test Championship. And as Varun was speaking, I kind of thought that, man, this is definitely a marketing gimmick. There was no need to have a final to decide who the best test team in the world is. Have it at the quote unquote home of cricket at Lords. And like, it's basically build up.
Which it's not anymore,
and we've
by
totally
the way.
fallen for it.
But it's not even at the home of cricket anymore.
Not anymore. It's been moved, but it was meant to be at Lords. We're totally
it's in the
fallen for it. I'm wearing my India jersey. I'm all pumped for this game. It's a great marketing gimmick, and I would love to see the cricket that's actually played.
It's actually being held in the lawns of the Hilton, right? Like the banquet hall of the Hilton Hotel in Southampton, where a lot of people get married.
Yeah, it's at the Aegeus Bowl, I think it's called. It should be called the Rose Bowl for a while. Then it was called Southampton Bowl for the game that we went to watch there 2 year. Man, it's been
Yeah.
That's because Aegeus didn't sponsor the World Cup, right? So for that specific match, neither was it the Kia Oval. The Kia Oval wasn't the Kia Oval. It was just the Oval. Like, just great.
I remember you messaging me and saying, "Are we sure that this is the same ground? Is it the Southampton?"
Because
Bowl?
I just floated from halfway across the world saying, "Are we going to the right ground?" We've rented a van for 7 people that I could barely drive on the wrong side of the street, and it was a whole thing, man.
Man, I wish you guys were here for this. It would have been incredible to watch it with you guys.
I mean,
you're actually going, right?
Yeah, so I mean, we've been in London in June 2017 Champions Trophy and June 2019 World Cup. So we would have definitely been there.
I'm saying, Ashwin, there's still time. Flights from the US next week. Aja.
Man, the fact that you're saying it and I'm actually thinking about it, even 0.1% is scaring me a little. But anyway, lots to get into. Lots to cover about the squads. We'll spend most of the front half of the show talking about the Team India journey. Varun, let me ask you, anything to add before I jump in?
No, I was going to say, did you guys see the new rules for the World Test Championship? One was the follow-on, that if there's no day's play on day 1 and 2, then the follow-on target, I don't know if it's the right word, reduces from 200
deficit.
to 1.
Yeah,
deficit reduces from 200 to 150.
But that's a rule generally also, but it's only for day 1 because they have a 6th day in this game.
So because there's a reserve day that I found interesting. And then they've also come out and said that there's no silly point and forward short leg because of social distancing.
What? This is a sazish against our spinners.
I was
That
just
is
going to
genius.
say,
This is
Akshar Patel can't really play this game.
No, you're
because,
kidding,
love-
right? This is a joke,
I love that
right?
DJ fell for
No,
it for a
there's
second.
only first and third slips allowed because there has to
Okay.
be 3 meter
Okay.
distance
Okay.
and no forward shot leg or silly point.
Okay, cool. Got it.
And so the bowlers also have to run 6 feet away from the umpires to bowl, so the crease becomes wider and all that.
Yeah, and you have to cut, right? I mean, the guy has to be ahead of the crease because he's too close to the bowler when he's delivering.
So Ashwin will just get 10 monkads.
Yeah, exactly. There's no option.
Great.
What a
This is
great
what I want to
match
go
this
to
is.
watch in Southampton. Excellent.
This is what they
Imagine.
did 3-week quarantines for, just to go and see Ashwin 10 monkads 6 feet apart from the umpire and the batters. Anyway, I do enjoy that DJ fell for the silly point short leg one for a split second.
The problem is the rules are so absurd all over the place. You're just like, this could actually happen.
I also started it with a real serious rule. That's why DJ fell for it.
That's it.
Yeah, see, that's good. It's all about timing, isn't it? Is you have to start with something serious and then. But explain the follow-on rule to me, Varun, because I think I remember reading about the fact that they just clarified it. Because
I only skimmed through it because I wanted to make this joke.
yeah, I'm basically calling you out of the fact that you just read the headline and then you bring the headline to the meeting, and then the rest of us have to do all the hard work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my thing was about the joke, so I think DJ hasn't spoken enough on the podcast. We can.
No, I'll
pass
come
it
to him.
over
I have plenty of time to come to him. I would like to ask you to explain the follow-on rule to our listeners.
No, I'm actually not sure. I'm trying to read it now. But basically, they're saying, yeah, I think because of the reserve day, if there's no play that occurs on day 1 and 2, the deficit changes to 150 runs. That's it.
So normally that only applies to day 1.
Yeah.
But because we have a 6th day available, which again is not going to be a 6th day of a test match, it's only available to make up for lost overs. That rule changes to day 1. So.
Yeah, but the
Anyway.
carry over any overs you don't bowl apparently into that 6th day, which is a pretty interesting rule. Like if you fall short of the over rate, apparently you can go into the 6th day, which is odd, right? Considering what's been going on in Test cricket these days with over rates and stuff.
It's amazing that we've gone from 4-day, a serious discussion about 4-day tests to now holding a 6th day because it's a WTC final. But DJ, do you know if they're not doing the extra 30 minutes at the beginning and end of every day and things like that? Because that's normally how they make up for lost overs.
So they will do that, but if they can't make up on the day, whatever's left over, I think it's a maximum of 83 overs plus the last hour's play, so 98 overs on the 6th day possible. So
let me ask you, we're going to spend a lot of this show talking about players and team selection, but before I get into specifics, strategically, this is a battle of 2 pace heavyweights. Does this added 6th day and the ability to get not be as concerned about over rate? Does it give you like license to play 1 extra quick bowler and know that, hey, maybe I'm not going to get through the overs, but that is not going to hurt me in a scorecard? Yeah, they're going to be fines for the captains and all that, but the board will pay those.
for me,
Yeah.
I don't know actually. I don't think we're going to play those many quicks, to be honest. The last test match India played in Southampton, we were spun out by Moeen Ali, right? And this is probably the pitch along with the oval pitch where the spinners come into play the most in England. I mean, we've been talking a lot about losing overs and stuff, but as I sit here, it's bright sunshine outside. May was particularly wet in the UK, but the weather has taken a turn for the better. So I can see the spinners actually coming into play. And today, I think Patel is playing for New Zealand. They've got Mitch Santner. We've obviously got 2 world-class spinners in Jadeja and Ashwin, but there's a lot of chat about fitting Siraj into this. But we'll come to all of that, but I don't think we're going to play only quicks. The team just looks lopsided if you try and do that. I mean, you've seen England do it, and captain sort of runs out of ideas after a certain point.
So the specific question was, do you think the overrate, lack of risk on overrate gives them license? And I'm hearing the answer is basically no.
No,
Okay.
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
Varun, this is largely a battle between 2 giants in the world of test match batting and all format batting, to be honest, right? You could argue that Kohli and Williamson are both right up there. You could find the case for either to be a better batsman in terms of their record, their impact, etc. Let's talk about them as skippers. Kohli didn't captain the last match that India played to get into the WTC final. That was obviously under the leadership of Ajinkya Rahane. Is
No, he
Williamson
did
a better?
against
Oh,
England.
sorry, the third. Yeah,
You just stopped. Time is stopped in the gamma for a lot of us.
that's true. Actually, you're right. We did play after the game.
A whole
Kohli didn't
series.
captain in the last matches of the Australia series. Thank you. Is Williamson a better captain than Kohli?
Oh, that's too loaded a question. I don't think we can answer that. But I want to say I'm glad that Kohli did captain the team after Australia, because I think if he had flown, or not flown, but if they had gone straight from that test all the way to England for the World Test Championship, Kohli flying in, meeting the team after they've won under Rahane, I think that would have played on his mind a little bit. So I think it's too hard to say who's the better captain. They're both number 1 and 2 in the World Test Championship League. Williamson, yeah, I hope he plays. I heard that he's got an elbow injury and he's actually out of the second Test match between England and New Zealand. I'm not sure if any of you guys heard that. Yeah, so I really hope he plays, because I want to see Williamson bat. I want to see Williamson on the field. He commands that New Zealand team. He's got the respect. Both these guys do. There's no kind of doubt that they're the undisputed leaders of their team. They go about it differently. One is much more calm. One is the complete opposite of that. But hey, that's Test cricket for you, right? You've got two different personalities, two different characters, and both have led their teams to the stage.
And they're both, it's like alpha versus beta, right? But they're both aggressive captains, which is what I like. You saw the declaration that Williamson made in the first Test match against England to set up
it wasn't
a game.
that aggressive a declaration. He could have declared 10, 15 overs earlier to be aggressive. Everybody was giving him all the credit in the world, but it wasn't that aggressive.
Yeah, but I mean, to be fair, how many teams come to the home of cricket and set a target and dangle the carrot, right? Like they could have just batted out for a draw equally, which is what England did, and they didn't even bother to go for the win.
So important, very unrelated question. It's 2021. You've said the expression "home of cricket" a bunch of times in the show. How many years until the Narendra Modi Stadium is called the home of cricket?
Well, I'm glad he first didn't say delta. He just said alpha versus beta.
Why, Varun? This is digressing into very dangerous territory. So we're just going to skip this
Why?
part.
The three of us have got together after a long time, but anyway.
That's true. I thought you said the show was better without me, guys. Come on. All right. DJ, let me quickly ask you before we spend the rest of the time talking about Team India, which honestly we could do for hours and hours. But England is currently playing their second test against New Zealand right now, as we speak. They just played, or New Zealand's playing against England. I think that's all they have, right? They only had 2 test matches and they got a little bit of a break. The first one ended in a draw. If anything, the second one looks like it might end in a draw too. England seems to be batting at a run rate of like just around about 2 runs and over. How much of an edge does the New Zealand squad get going into Southampton, having just played 2 full test matches in England, while India's dealing with quarantine at home, fly in, quarantine in England, bio bubble, all the mental health toll, etc., that the players have talked about? How much of an edge does New Zealand get just from that?
So I'd say a little bit of an edge, because Test cricket is Test cricket, right? The Indians are just sat there in Southampton on the lawns of the Hilton in Southampton, as Varun put it, practicing. So they've probably got a better feel of the conditions on the ground themselves. But the cauldron of Test cricket and having crowds back in and all of that stuff, because you can see the crowds have gone back in England with vaccination numbers up and stuff. I think there is a little bit of an edge there for New Zealand, having played Test cricket more recently than India. The last cricket the Indian players have played is the IPL. They'll have good memories from the England tour, but that was total different set of conditions. So, they're coming in a little bit cold, but they would have come in like this in any event if the IPL had gone to its conclusion as well, which would have ended like on the 30th of May, right? So I don't think it's different. It's just a fact of life that the schedule is like this. And I don't know, maybe the intra-squad games that they're likely to play will actually be decent practice given the strength of the squad at the moment. So a little bit of an edge, but not too much, I'd say.
Also remember, India loses their first test, right? We lost in Australia in a 4-test series. We lost in India at home in a 4-test series, if I remember correctly. So
why are you like this?
No, I'm just saying there's no 4-test series, so maybe we just lose the first innings and then we win by the 4th innings, right? That's a better way to look at it.
With
We're also now
punctuating.
perfectly set up for an excuse if we don't win. That's like, yeah, but if this was a 3-match series,
So that's
I'm
what
willing to
Shastri and
Yeah,
Kohli said.
but it's
dude, I'm willing
100%
to bet
correct.
if we lose, then for sure the next World Test Championship final will be a series, regardless
Yeah.
of whether we make it or not. For sure,
It's like when India got chucked out of the semi-final, they're like, yeah, maybe we should have more points, or you should get a direct route to the final if you finish top of the table. Which
Like
is
the IPL route. But no, but I think Ashwin's right. But either way, I think they're going to move to a 3-test. And somebody said that, I read it today, that if this is the pinnacle of cricket in terms of a tournament, then you have to make space in the calendar for a 3-test, best of 3.
yeah, couldn't agree more. So with that, we're going to have come to the lovely discussion about who in Team India is going to field come June 18th, the pinnacle of Test cricket, the World Test Championship final. It's interesting. I don't know how you guys have been thinking about the squad and what to play and spinners versus quicks and stuff. But Varun, the last time we talked about Test squads, which I assume would have been the England series, which obviously I completely seem to have forgotten because I was talking about the Gabba being our last match. But our batting continues to seem pretty well settled, right? There's really one or two decisions to be made with the batting, and those are around Mayank Agarwal and Hanuma Vihari. But we can go through pretty quickly. But top 5 Test batsmen are pretty well set, right? You're going to open with Gill and Rohit. You're going to go Pujara, Kohli, and Rahane at 3, 4, 5. Is there any debate for you on those 5?
No, I mean, there's no debate. Our 3, 4, 5 have always been set. I think it's interesting because after the first test in Australia, we had no idea who our openers were going to be. So the fact that it seems a little more settled is firstly big kudos to Rohit Sharma. I'm still not 100% sure on Gill versus Mayank. Like, I feel that Gill hasn't done enough for us to just put him in the team without any debate or discussion. And at the same time, Mayank hasn't done enough to just be left out. So I think what works for Gill is that within Test cricket, he's got that slightly more attacking game where he helped set up that chase at the Gabba. So you can't forget the fact that he's attacking. He's got that young, fearless mindset. But Mayank hasn't done much wrong. Now, coming to answer your question, yeah, I do think they'll go with Gill, though.
DJ, Gill or Mayank? Mayank averages nearly 48 as a Test opener, but obviously recency bias hasn't done as well. We brought him into play at 5 in that Gabba match just because we had nobody else around, and Mayank arguably had a much, much better IPL season than Shubman Gill. Does any of that weigh into the choices the team's making?
So it's a tough call, right? Because I mean, it's a chance of a lifetime to play a World Test Championship final. It's the first one ever. Who knows what it goes on to become? Maybe we're calling it the pinnacle of Test cricket right now, but it's the first time it's ever happened. So I think it's going to go on how they look in the nets, and I think the Indian team will take a look at Mayank in the nets, and they'll take a look at Gill in the nets, and whoever looks the better player. It's going to be a really tough call, I have to say. Gill didn't do particularly well on the England tour, let's remember. England tour of India, and he hasn't been tested against the moving ball at the adult international level. I think when they won the Under-19 World Cup, they played that in New Zealand, if I'm not wrong, under Prithvi Shaw. So he did score runs there.
ODI versus Test, even in that level, would be different, right? In terms of handling the pace swing bowling.
Yeah, but he's got he's got and playing. I mean, it's almost like having more experience would count in favor of Mayank there because he's a more mature player. He's got more runs at domestic cricket. He's been to New Zealand.
And he's been to England.
Has he been to England before?
I think, what about the series you and I watched in like the game we saw in Nottingham?
No, he made his debut in 2019. 2018, 2019 at the Boxing Day. That was at the end of
that
year.
So he hasn't.
So the only guy who's actually, funnily enough, the only guy who's actually scored runs in English conditions and has been here since kind of March is actually Vihari.
Yeah.
So
we will come to Vihari next.
Yeah, and he's batted for India before. Fantastic. So I think it's going to be a call taken on who looks best in the nets. I don't know who to back at this stage, to be honest. So over to Ravi and Virat.
Varun, you mentioned him. So Hanuma Vihari, right? Batted at 6 for us over the last couple of years consistently. Obviously, when we played England, he didn't factor into the equation. there's a master stroke, if you will, strategically, that he's been in England, practicing in English conditions, playing the county cricket, playing against the swinging red ball, etc. Yeah, and yet Rishabh Pant has shown that he's a worthy number 6 as well, arguably, right? For a while, as Rishabh Pant started his test career, he was batting at 7. Sahag always consistently kind of batted at 7, giving you room for 4 bowlers. We talked over the years about Vihari and the bowling option he gives you and this, that, and he's not bowling a ton. But does Vihari fit in at number 6 for you?
Or does
Vihari,
he open for you by any chance?
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? Vihari to me is a great player. I really like him. I feel like I just can't believe that we can have a debate around whether Vihari should play in a test playing 11 for India. It baffles me sometimes. And I was pretty vocal about this with a friend of mine and saying that, he should even consider playing instead of Rahane, because as much as I love Rahane sometimes throws his wicket away, especially with a cut shot that gets an edge straight to the keeper, right? How many times have we seen him do that?
But time is stopped again at the Gabba. Everybody just remembers that.
You Google it. Or you watch videos. He gets out like so many times. But the reality is that I don't think Vihari had a good county season, and that was the counter argument from my friend, that I think in his debut he was 0 and 8. I think after that maybe his top score was like 32. Guys, I don't know.
32, 52, 0, 0, 8, and 8. So not
so
good.
That's it. So it's not good enough. So, and I think that really pushes the debate out the window in some sense. Yeah, there's conditions. There's having been in England, but if he's not done well enough, what's to say that somebody with the experience of Rahane should be left? Now, I get it. Rahane is not in anyone else's mind, but it'll be pretty left field if they open with him. I mean, it could be go out there, block, don't take a run, play 100 balls and make only 7 runs or 8 runs, but just get the ball to stop moving after Trent Bolt finishes. I don't think India plays that brand of cricket, but hey, it's tempting, right? It's not bad. I can't remember the last time, and DJ, your memory is much better than ours, but I can't remember the last time an Indian opener who debuted in England and did well. I think that is pretty tough, right? If you guys remember, tweet into us, man. It'll be great to.
Might be Sanjay Bangar did pretty well.
Yeah, maybe. I don't even remember. I didn't know he opened the batting for India, but.
Yeah. Dravidis, like Trent Bridge, they set up a win. But I mean, Vihari's opened once in Sydney on the first, like the 2019 tour. But it's
he made like 6 of 93 or something.
No,
he scored like 8 of 93 or 90 something. But like got out after the first hour after doing his job.
Wasn't that at MCG?
No, SCG.
Oh, SCG.
Okay. Yeah, because Rahul got dropped.
So DJ, let's come back to Rahane though for a quick second. You talked about how our memories are stopping at the Gabba, etc. But I'm looking up the England series. Rahane batted in 6 innings, made 112 runs at an average of 18 or so, right? At the same time, Pant made 270 in 6 innings. Rohit made 345 in 7 innings. Ashwin made more runs than him. Sundar made more runs than him, right? So has Rahane done well enough over the course of his career to justify saying he is still our best number 5 walking into the World Test Championship final?
100%. 100%. He's a man who scored 100 on a green top at Lords in like 2014. He scored 81 when Varun and I were at Trent Bridge. He scored that magnificent 112 at Melbourne. He's a man, when the chips are down, he's the guy you look to, right? And I mean,
but the chips aren't down. But that's the thing. The chips aren't down.
When you're 12 for 3 and then Rahane walks 15.
in. Isn't that your line? 15 for 3 against New Zealand. Trent Bolt picks up 3 wickets off the lefty swing.
Why have you made it 12? Why have
because
you
we don't even know who our opener is going to be.
Why have you docked us 3 runs?
No, but like imagine it. Like you're 15 for 3 and then would you rather have I don't know. Is the option Vihari or Rahane? For me, it's Rahane, right? He's a vice captain of the team. He catches everything in the slips. He scored runs in England. It's not even a debate for me.
Actually, I think you're right. He's the vice captain. He's going to play, right? So there's no point.
Right now we were talking whether he should be captain of the team.
But Rohit was the vice captain under Rahane, so Rohit is the vice captain at this point, right?
He's assistant to the assistant.
How good has Rohit been in this World Test Championship that we're not even talking about his spot on the top of the order? Fantastic.
Anybody who's listened to this show has heard probably the first year and a half talking about how Rohit belong in the test team.
Talent.
All right, we're going to run out of
talent.
time and we need to absolutely talk about the bowlers. So we've talked about our top 5. We've talked about kind of punt at 6-ish. And I'm saying ish because we need to decide how many bowlers Team India plays, right? 7 through 11 is 5 spots. Varun, arguably a lot of contenders for those spots, right? Let's start with kind of the all-rounder territory, right? You have Washington Sundar, who's had a great run in Test cricket. I know you don't necessarily feel like he belongs. I'm going to put his name out there. You have Ravi Jadeja, who, DJ has said it in the past on the show should be automatic in all 3 formats. You have Ravi Ashwin, who, of course, one of the all-time greats, in my opinion, as a spinner. And then you come to our quicks, right? You have Bumrah, Shami, Ishant, and Yadav all available. Yadav has largely fallen out of favor with the side. So let's drop him for this discussion. Bumrah, Shami, Ishant. And then all the discussion seems to be about Siraj, who stepped up and led the pace attack in Australia. And now you have to choose between 4 and 5 guys from all the names I just listed. And I haven't even listed both of your favorite Shardul Thakur, who is also in the squad and has flown with the team. So, Varun, walk me through your strategy for the bowlers.
It's a tough one. You actually, when you think about the last 2 years of the World Test Championship, this should not be a tough decision. You should be thinking Ashwin and Jadeja, Bumrah, Shami and Ishant. That's it. You look at the stats over the last 4 years. I don't think any pace trio has picked up more wickets than these 3. I don't think any spin duo has picked up more wickets than these 2. It should be as simple as that. There's no discussion. It should be these 5. But it's not that simple. Let's talk about the spinners first. I think given it's Southampton, I'm not 100% sure of New Zealand's track record against spin, but I feel like India would have an edge by playing that extra spinner in New Zealand, especially given what Moeen Ali did to us, given the ground and their kind of ability to cope with top spin bowling. So I would actually play these 2 also because Jadeja and Ashwin both can bat and they give you that depth. Now, you talked about Washington Sundar. I've always said this with him. Great character, great guy, asset, talent, but he needs to be chosen for his bowling, not his batting. And unless he turns that around and becomes a number 5 for India in the batting lineup, he's not going to get picked on, at least for me. So that's the 2 spinners I would play. DJ, why don't we go talk about the spinners first before we get to pacers?
I think we play 2 spinners. In my mind, Jadeja and Ashwin are both good enough batsmen. They've shown it over the course of this World Test Championship. Jadeja's batting has had a incredible revival. I mean, you could even see, and you see the commitment by these guys, right? Like you saw the commitment in that Sydney draw. Like Ashwin and Vihari battling it out. You saw Jadeja padded up to come in with a broken thumb. I mean, it's ballistic. And we've seen Jadeja score 86, I think, on the last tour of England. He scored 86 at the Oval in the last Test match, and he said that's where everything turned around for him. So Jadeja walks into the team, and Ashwin has to walk into the team for his record against left-handers. How many left-handers does that New Zealand team have? And in the second half, we will talk about the New Zealand team and their strengths and weaknesses. But I think no-brainer for me. Both the top spinners in the world have to play, and fantastic with the bat and in the field with Jadeja.
Yeah, I think very clear, right? Jadeja, Pant, Jadeja, Ashwin are the consensus for 6, 7, 8, right? And DJ, you've also been critical in the past of how Ashwin doesn't have the fitness to get through a long series. So here's where it helps us that it's a single match, right? You have to believe that Ashwin will bring his full fitness for the one match and then rest it out for 3 full weeks before they start playing against England.
Absolutely.
All right, Varun, let's come back to you then. 4 gun quicks, 5 gun quicks, and Shardul, and you only have room for 3. Make your choice.
I just forget talking about Shardul, please. It's
I'm
ridiculous
just for you guys.
Bro, it's just ridiculous that we're talking about the
7 wickets in his last Test match.
Please.
Averages 22
This is why I'm
with
bringing
the
it
ball,
up,
and
'cause DJ was gonna say
Shardulkar.
We're
Bad.
We're like talking about the pinnacle of the pinnacle of cricket, like the pinnacle of cricket, and we're discussing whether Shardul and Sundar should be playing.
But they were instrumental in getting us there at the Gabba.
Yeah, I get it. But when you come out of the fortress, you realize that there's like
This is
reality.
basically like the CEO move. Get all the bachas to do the work, come in and close the deal, and then
Yeah.
sign the deal and take the press photo.
That's Shami, right? Shami is the CEO here.
Yeah, I mean,
He got the hard work and
he
showed up.
got injured because
36 for
Wow.
9.
yeah. So yeah, that was Shami's last game. So anyway, look, I think Bumrah and Shami for me are in. There's no debate. I think especially second inning Shami, as we call him, like Rowdy Rathod, kind of a movie name. I think you play Shami, even if it's just for the second innings. He's superb with that. And then it comes down to Ishant versus Siraj. So what is fair is that Ishant must play with all his experience, what he's done for Indian cricket, what he has delivered in the last 3 to 4 years. You say Ishant must play, and then all of a sudden you read this news article today that says Team India trying to make way for Siraj, and suddenly you're like, how is this possible? How is India going to play Siraj? And should India play Siraj? Why not? He was the leader of the attack in Australia. He bowled good line and length. He picked up wickets, and I think that last point is what Shastri and Kohli will probably be thinking, that do we need that wicket taker that when every time we threw him the ball in Australia, he came in and took a wicket. And let's remember the pitches in England do more than Australia. So there could be a case, and it's going to basically, in my opinion, come down to Ishant versus Siraj. That's it. That's the only unsure thing.
DJ, I'm going a little bit with Ishant just because of the same argument you said on Ashwin, right? The sheer number of left-handers. And Ishant, granted, doesn't swing the ball both ways, but he does swing the ball away from the left-hander in what has often been an unplayable delivery. India is also a little bit of a country and a little bit of a board that's, this could be Ishant's last hurrah. Siraj has more years ahead of him. Do you give Ishant the opportunity now? I wouldn't want that to factor, but final decision, Ishant versus Siraj.
I've got a slightly different take on all of this, to be honest. And I think...
If you say Shardul, I'm leaving the podcast.
You're going to drop Shami, aren't you?
Yeah. And the reason, and I'll give you the reason for that. And like, if you just think about it, you think about the cricket you've watched and you're like, this guy is fantastic in these conditions. There's a little bit of wobble seam. He's very unlucky, all of that stuff together. But he hasn't played test cricket since, when was it? 19th of December, I think, 36 for 9. Right? He hasn't played test cricket. Played a little bit of IPL. And he looked like he was carrying a little bit of excess baggage in that IPL as well. He averages 47 with the ball in 8 test matches in England. And maybe it's a case of catches have gone off him or whatever it is, but those are not top class figures for a player of his caliber, right? Like 8 test matches, he's been on 2 tours. He hasn't picked up those many wickets. Now, and if they're looking to force fit someone into the side for Siraj, I mean, they're pretty much the same bowler in some ways, right? Like they hit the deck hard. They're quick through the air. There's seam movement either way. They're quite clever. Hustle, right?
You could argue that for all three, right?
The Bumrah's different.
No, not Bumrah. I'm saying Ishant.
Ishant brings you that control, which a Shami sometimes gives away, like with stuff on the leg side and stuff, or used to give away when he wasn't that fit. Where his fitness got a lot better in over the last year. So my worry would be Shami not being test match fit, whereas Siraj is younger, fitter, and you saw what he could do with the ball. Now, the argument against that is he hasn't bowled in England that much. So, I mean, but for me, it's not. I think Ishant has to play because he's a leader of the attack. He gives you that control. Bumrah has to play, and then it's a toss-up between Siraj and Shami for me.
Right. So no clear consensus here. Varun, I think I'm closer to your camp. I think they're going to go with the tested, tried and true Bumrah, Ishant, and Shami. I can 100% see the logic for DJ. Either way, of course, it's exciting. We're going to be backing the boys as we take go into the break before we come back and talk about the New Zealand side, which is also unbelievable, right? From Bolt to Southey to Matt Henry to Wagner to Jameson. I mean, they're going to have the same kind of dilemmas on pace bowlers, but we're going to talk about that in the second half. Let me quickly ask you, wrap up this half with a prediction. Team India, Team New Zealand, or a draw? Draw/tie means they're both going to be lifting the trophy. I'll go first. Yeah, go ahead. What are you going to say?
Can they win on boundary count or no?
If India can win on boundary count, then Rohit is going to be the ultimate in this team selection. I'm gonna go with Team India, and I know that's against all odds. I just feel like this team has what it takes, and Kohli's going to be lifting that trophy. Varun, let me come to you.
Yeah, I have to say India. I have to say India. There's no doubt.
Now DJ is going to be the naysayer and say New Zealand or draw.
No chance.
Or unless DJ
no
says
chance, bro. Look
New
at
Zealand.
this.
Unless
For
India,
those of you watching on YouTube, I'm wearing an India t-shirt. It's India all the way.
I thought DJ is going to say 2-1 to India or something.
India lose the first test and win the next two. No, but it's India all the way, man. Like we've had our ups and downs in England. We've been knocked out in the semi-final, which really hurt. I think a lot of us and a lot of our listeners. So a little bit of redemption, I think, is on its way, and looking forward to being part of that.
Right. That brings us to a wrap of this part of the show. Thank you, gentlemen. Great discussion. Very exciting. The Euros kick off tomorrow. There's a lot of action happening, but make sure you stay tuned for the second half of the show here, where we're going to be talking about the New Zealand team. So with that, we're going to take a Seat Tire strategic timeout. We will be right back to talk more about the World Test Championship.
And we're talking about the World Test Championship final that's starting on the 18th of June. Now, in the first half of the show, you've all heard about the India side of things. And of course, we're an Indian cricket podcast, so we love talking about Team India and their chances. But in the second half of the show, we've got a fantastic podcast, including a Kiwi, called the Top Order Podcast. Stu, Adam, and Michael, welcome to the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast. Thank you for making the time to join us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
No
great.
problem. Pleasure to be here.
It's fantastic to have you guys on. So, Stu, let's just start with a little bit of background about the Top Order Podcast. Obviously, you run it along with Adam and Michael. So tell us a little bit about how you guys started it. You're a Kiwi, Adam's an Englishman, Michael's an Aussie. So how have you all got together and started this podcast?
Well, there's another guy on it normally as well, Raj, who's sort of Fijian Indian, but born and raised here in New Zealand as well. So I do have a little bit of Kiwi support on a regular basis, which is nice for me. But yeah, we're just a group of friends. We all used to play at the same cricket club, and it sort of started. We catch up every Wednesday, have a quiz night, and just got talking one night after quiz, saying it's sort of a good excuse to catch up and have a drink and talk cricket. And I guess the Cricket World Cup was the catalyst for us starting it, and we all watched it together in Binksy's living room, which was great for one of us in the podcast, and not so great for a couple of us. But it's been a really fun thing, and I think just talking to you beforehand, it's a good excuse just to catch up with your friends, isn't it? So it's been great.
Absolutely, and it's nice of the big three, being India, England, and Australia, to let the little guy into their group. So, welcome to the big leagues too. Adam, I'm going to come to you on this question, and we talked a little bit about this in the first half of the show, and there are some questions around whether New Zealand, quote unquote, deserve to be in this World Test Championship final. Have they played enough? Have they done enough? I mean, they are, and my view is very much look in the scorebook. They're second in the table and they're playing the game. But what do the English have to say about that?
Yeah, so look, I guess whilst I'm an Englishman, I would call New Zealand home and have done for the last 10 years. So have a soft spot for the scrappy underdogs that are the Black Caps. Look, I guess I kind of put the shoe on the other foot. There was a lot of whinging after that World Cup final around the rules and regulations in that final. So look, I guess New Zealand can't have it both ways in that, they want the rules to be applied in terms of the permutations for the World Test Championship, but want to change to the rules for boundary countbacks in a World Cup final. But look, jokes aside, we've discussed it a lot on the Top Order podcast as well, the way that the teams have qualified. I don't think with the current format and TV deals, you're ever going to get a situation where you have equity across all of the now, 10 or 11 test playing nations, let alone, the big 5 or 6 teams. So the fact that, England have played 20 odd games, New Zealand, I think, have played just 11 to qualify for this final, and India somewhere in the middle of that. We were never going to get that perfect situation. So I think, you've got to look at the rules and the rehash of those to go to the percentage rather than the series points. And look, I'm really, really looking forward to this World Test Championship final. I think the Rose Bowl or Ageas Bowl is going to be a really, really good venue, hopefully, because it'll bring a little bit of spin into the game. And we'll see who the best side in the world is for this little cycle, won't we?
Absolutely. Michael, being the resident Aussie, surely you've got a view on this. You guys didn't go to South Africa. You had your fate in your own hands, a little bit like England did, but then England obviously ran up against Akshar Patel and 27 wickets in 2-day test matches and things. So, but what are your views as an Aussie supporter, I suppose?
Well, you're absolutely right. Australia had their destiny in their own hands when they had an opportunity to beat India at home and weren't able to do so. And that really put the nail in the coffin of our World Test Championship hopes. And then it was, having to rely on other results go our way in order to make the final. But we can't forget that also Australia were docked valuable World Test Championship points for slow over rate. So, you've got to get the basics right. And if you want to play in the final, you have to take care of those little 1%ers, and Australia just didn't do that. And I think ultimately on the balance of play, Australia don't deserve to be in the World Test Championship final, having gone down to India at home.
Harsh but fair, I think. Well said, Michael. Stu, I'm going to come to you because we've talked a lot about the Indian side, but I want to know more about this New Zealand side. We've talked about their journey here. They've done fantastically. But I want to go back about a decade in time where I remember a scene where Kyle Mills was sledging Faf du Plessis. Kyle Mills was the 12th man. He wasn't even playing. He comes on with drinks, has an absolute go at Faf du Plessis for running AB de Villiers out in the World Cup 2011 World Cup quarterfinal. How have you guys managed to make yourselves the nice guys of cricket? I don't get it. You were one of the worst sledging teams, and now you've got Kane Williamson, you've got Trent Bolt, Southey, all of these nice people. What have you done?
Well, yeah, I know. Sometimes I kind of wonder why we're such the nice guys, but I think really it's sort of that image essentially started with when McCullum and Hesson got together, and suddenly I think it also came with us actually performing and starting to win some games, because you can be the nice guys. You can be the nice guys all you want, but if no one really takes any notice of you, if you're just losing all the games. So I think once McCullum, between him and Hesson, their leadership brought on a sort of aggressive attitude, but still doing things, the right way, in quote unquote. So, and I think it's just continued on, and probably that's got even more with Kane Williamson taking over. I mean, I would say there's not many people around international cricket that would have a bad word to say about him, on or off the field. So, yeah, I think with him and Gary Stead, they've just kind of continued that on. And I mean, you even saw it in that first England test at Lords. Ross Taylor took a catch and, went, oh, well, I'm not sure if I took it, you better check it upstairs. And then you have yesterday where Stuart Broad gets the decision not out and puts on a huge performance. So, yeah, you can see the contrast there.
Michael, do you think they stopped trying to be Australian in a way? They got out of the shadow of their big brother and said, we're going to play cricket our way. Because I remember McCullum as well running out Muralitharan when he was going to shake Sangakkara's hand and ending the innings. So McCullum wasn't a saint. He's obviously changed over the years. But do you think it was coming out of the Aussie and we want to be more like Australia and becoming their own men?
I think for a small period of time there, a lot of teams tried to play cricket like Australia and weren't quite able to emulate that success, either, with their skill set or with the mental side of the game. I think Stuart hit the nail on the head in that Brendan McCullum was really the catalyst for New Zealand finding their own identity, and Kane Williamson has taken that and stepped it up a level in terms of the stamp that he's put on the way that New Zealand play. It's a very good point that I think New Zealand have started to forge their own identity in the last 5 or 6 years in particular. I'm reminded of the sort of post-Phil Hughes kind of period where New Zealand deliberately chose to play cricket a certain way, and that was a real catalyst for me in understanding a change in their identity, or really a recognition of their identity as a cricket nation. But you're absolutely right. It has been an evolution, and I think you can see from the way Australia have kind of fallen off the pedestal that if you're at the tops, you can get away with some of that behaviour. But if you don't have the skills to back it up, then some of that boorish behaviour can get pretty wearing at times on the opposition and on fans in general.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, having got the banter out of the way, let's get down to the cricket. Adam, I'm going to come to you first. Devon Conway, talk me through how this man has emerged and seems to be scoring runs for fun against England, and how is he going to play spin? Because England kindly haven't really tested New Zealand with spin in either of these test matches, whereas I think India are going to probably play two spinners and two of the best spinners in the world. So Conway and how he's going to play spin, please.
Yeah, so look, I think he has obviously a long first-class career, both in South Africa, where he played a lot of his cricket, and then coming over to New Zealand and playing for Wellington. You're dead right. He's not been tested in those real top echelons against quality spins, save a couple of white ball innings against Bangladesh, who didn't have a full strength side really in town for those games either. So look, that is going to be a big thing for him. But I think the way that I think he's going to approach it is he just looks so composed in that Test match debut innings at Lords. We talked about it a little bit on our podcast as well. Mark Wood rattled him a couple of times with some short pitch deliveries. But even after that, he was right on the front foot when the ball was pitched up to drive down the ground and looked very, very compact. So look, I think he will know what his method is, and I think he will stick with that method, whether it's good enough, particularly if that pitch does offer a little bit of spin later in the game. Only time will tell. I think the other big thing is obviously as a left-hander, DRS comes into play, particularly for Ashwin against those left-handers in that New Zealand lineup. So it's going to be really interesting to see what his method is there as well. But he looks pretty unflappable. And I think often you'll see players come into their first season of international cricket, and whilst there's still a lot of data from their domestic game, it might take India just a little while to figure out from a test match perspective where they need to be bowling to him. And in a one-off test match, if that comes after 100 in his first innings, then it might be a little too late.
Absolutely. He seems to be scoring runs for fun. Now, Stu, you've got Latham up there with him. He averages about 40 in Test cricket, a very, very good cricketer, followed by Kane Williamson and Ross Taylor. Now, there you've got Henry Nicholls, you've got Will Young, who's just scored some runs. Talk me through the batting lineup that you think you're going to put forward. How many batsmen are you going to play? Because you've got all-rounders in Kyle Jamieson as well. So let's go through the lineup and talk about the likely combination that New Zealand are going to put out for this World Test Championship final.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a few of the guys there, and I think realistically, probably our only selection dilemma, taking away any injuries or anything like that. Obviously, they've had a number of guys sort of sit out, but I think that's just resting in the second test against England. But to me, the only real question is the all-rounder and who will bat at 7. I think we'll be fairly settled. You know, before this England tour, I guess there were some questions about Devon Conway. Will he actually be able to open? It's not his natural position, although he does bat 3 for Wellington. But yeah, I mean, I think you've got Latham and Conway opening. You'll have Kane Williamson at 3, Ross Taylor at 4, Henry Nicholls at 5, and then they'll play BJ Watling at 6, you would expect. I mean, you know, as much as Will Young has looked relatively good yesterday and has been performing, kind of been the next cab off the rank, actually even before Devon Conway was eligible, he was the next cab off the rank in New Zealand batting, and just sort of unfortunately didn't make his debut because of I guess probably the number of tests that we play even. But you know, you look through that top 5 and Ross Taylor's our number 1 test batsman in terms of runs of all time. Kane Williamson's at 3 and probably will get to second pretty quickly. Latham's at 9 and Watling's at 10 in our all-time run scorers chart. So, you know, they just pick themselves really. As I said, and then you go on to the bowlers. I think they're going to go with that 4-pronged pace attack that served them so well. So they'll have Southey, Bolt, Wagner, and Jameson. And then the real question is what they do with that all-rounder spot. I think that Gary Stead, trying to read the tea leaves, he's been talking a lot about the fact that they might need a spinner. We don't play spinners that much in New Zealand, certainly at home, but I think that means that Mitchell Santner will play as much as probably if we wanted to go a bit more in depth. I don't think there's any question that he's not our number one spinner. Ajaz Patel certainly doing a nice job in this current test and has done a good job for us away from home in the past. But yeah, just realistically, I think that probably makes our batting lineup a little bit, or the tail a little bit too long if Jameson's at 7 and then you've got the rest of the bowlers at 8.
Very interesting. I want to pick up on a couple of things there. Firstly, Michael, maybe I'll come to you on this one because obviously the greatest ever wicketkeeper batsman in the history of Test cricket was Australian and obviously Adam Gilchrist. But where does BJ Watling rank amongst the wicketkeeper batsmen in the usual Kiwi way? He's super understated. I remember an innings that he played with Brendan McCullum where McCullum got 300 odd and Watling just hung around with him and got 150 or something. But he seems to be the guy when it's 50 for 5. He's the guy you want walking in at that stage. So, and he said he's going to retire after the World Test Championship final, I think. So talk to me about BJ Watling.
Yeah, beautiful swan song coming up. Fitness pending for BJ Watling in this World Test Championship final, and caps off a tremendous career, I think, now as probably the greatest wicketkeeper batsman that New Zealand have ever had. And that's saying something. New Zealand have had some pretty good wicketkeeper bats over the years. McCullum was fantastic, primarily a batsman, I think, on the whole in his career. He wore the gloves for a long time, but back injuries curtailed that. Of course, BJ Watling started as an opening bat and then sort of grew into the glove work. He wasn't a traditional gloveman first and then sort of worked on his batting. So, he's had to work tremendously hard, and that shows in both his physical attributes, what he brings to the team, but also his mental state. You touched on 50 for 5. No one has scored more runs, I think, in the last 3 or 4 years than BJ Watling, coming in at 100 for 4 or 150 for 4 or less. No one scored more runs in those situations in world cricket than BJ Watling. So, if he doesn't score runs, it's normally because the situation's not dire enough. And he'll exit the game as, I think, one shy now of the highest tenured wicketkeeper in terms of innings kept and test matches kept for his country, certainly with the most runs as a wicketkeeper bat. He's a tremendous cricketer, and New Zealand will miss him very greatly, and he's been an absolute stalwart and probably the heartbeat of that New Zealand side, at least emotionally, over the last 5 or 6 years or so.
Fantastic. And he's just such a hard-working cricketer. You can almost see him working hard for those runs. The all-rounder question, Adam, I'm going to come to you on this one. Daryl Mitchell has played these test matches. So does he make the starting 11 for you, or is it going to be Mitch Santner to provide that left-arm variety?
Yeah, look, I think I'd probably defer a little bit to Stu on that and the comments he made around Santner being the likely fulcrum to provide the balance to that side, really alongside Watling. If Watling couldn't bat at 6 and was only I guess the sort of typical keeper batsman that comes in at 7, New Zealand might have a little bit of a problem. I think the fact that they've got that fulcrum of BJ Watling, they've got Mitchell Santner, and they've got Kyle Jamieson, who I sort of would describe him as a really, really good 7.5 in Test cricket. He's not quite a number 7, and he's probably a bit better than a number 8. I think that's going to provide them with that balance. I know the guys, and Lippy might want to comment on this, would have probably gone with Mitchell ahead of de Grandhomme in that first test at Lords against England. Because he'd earned the right from some runs in the New Zealand summer. But yeah, I guess modern cricket now, you see players in possession of the role quite often. Even if they do have a period of injury or they're rotated, they come back in. So I think that's probably why they went with de Grandhomme in that first test. So for me, yeah, that's the selection dilemma for New Zealand, is how they squeeze all of those guys in. But I think it's likely to come down to Mitchell Santner.
And Stu, just sticking with Mitchell Santner, I believe he's only taken 4 first innings wickets in the last 13 innings he's bowled. So, is that a bit of a worry for you, for your number one spinner, not picking first innings wickets, even 1 or 2 in a
Yeah,
game?
look, completely. And I mean, yeah, I think in an ideal world, and that we wouldn't have Mitchell Santner as our spinner. I think that he's been a serviceable player. He's much more of a holding bowler. Although to be fair, he in the first test at Lords against England, he actually did look to spin it a little bit more than I've seen in recent times. And the unfortunate thing, I guess, in New Zealand is that some of the tests that we play at home, that the pitches are very green. It's very difficult for a spinner to even really have a role. And really, Kyle Jamieson's emergence has made it so tricky for someone like Ajaz Patel to actually fit into the side. And I mean, if we weren't playing on a pitch that is supposedly going to take some spin, then we might just go in with Colin de Gronholm and really just go, okay, look, these are our 4 or 5 best bowlers, or pick Daryl Mitchell and just go, well, let's just pick 7 batsmen and our 4 seamers can just do the job. Because, yeah, as much as I would like to see Ajaz play, and Ajaz, I thought, bowled really well in this second test. We'll see in the next couple of days if he can spin us to a victory. But yeah, as I said before, I think just the tail, probably the way that they've picked the side, they've been a bit cautious about having a really long tail, and I just don't see them doing it in such a big game.
Yeah, and just sticking with that, I'm actually quite pleased as an Indian fan. You haven't actually mentioned Matt Henry. He was instrumental in kicking us out of the World Test. I say World World Cup 2019 with that spell up front. And do you not think he's going to make the first 11, Stu? Matt Henry, particularly with the mental impact that perhaps some of the Indians still have from that spell in 2019?
Look, I think that's it's a testament to the depth that we've got in New Zealand. I mean, I think it'd be a really out of the box selection to pick him, particularly because it would mean that you'd have to leave out Southey, Bolt, Wagner, or Jamieson. You'd have to leave out one of them, and you're talking about Tim Southey, who's he just keeps getting better. I think a couple of us wrote him off really a few years ago and thought, look, he's on the decline, but I think I saw a stat that he's taken 100 wickets in about 20 tests since the start of 2018 at under 22s. You've got Trent Bolt, who's just been tremendous for us for a number of years as well. Neil Wagner just always seems to come good in the key moments. And the big moments, it seems to be Neil Wagner that they turn to, and that he picks up the wicket, or he just finds a way to be successful. I think probably the point about him is that these 2 pitches that we've seen in England haven't been very helpful for his bowling. I think he's known really for his short pitch bowling, as much as he did burst onto the New Zealand scene as a big swing bowler. The pitches lately, or these 2 pitches in England, haven't really suited him. And I would say if they were going to at all do something, it would be, he'd maybe be the one, or if Bolt had a bit of an injury niggle or just wasn't feeling good coming straight into the game. But they've just been so good for so many years. And I think, we spoke to Matt Henry just before they left on the tour, and he spoke about how this World Test Championship, it does mean something to those players, and that they've built towards this. And I think it would be pretty harsh to not reward the guys who have been there over and over again and kind of got us to that point. So yeah, and Jamieson, he's just had such a start to international cricket. Performed really well against India in the 2 tests at home in New Zealand. So yeah, I would be absolutely blown away if they didn't pick all those 4 seamers.
And of course, Indian fans still have nightmares of Trent bowling over the wicket, swinging it back into the right-hander falling over and being given out LBW. But we're not going to get into that anymore. Michael, is there any temptation to play an extra batsman? Now, the reason for that, and I think we talked about this in our half of the show previewing India, was we will play 5 bowlers because there's the attacking mindset to try and win. But is there any temptation to play an extra batsman? Because the draw means that the championship will be shared. Now, depends on how the pitch shakes out and all of that. But do you think these two teams are going to go with 5 bowlers, or maybe there's a small chance they are going to play 4 bowlers and have that insurance of an extra batsman to maybe play for a draw on the last day?
Look, DJ, I don't think so. I think both teams have had a bit of a track record now of playing 5 bowlers, particularly on matches, on wickets like this that offer some assistance. New Zealand's challenge, of course, is that they don't really have anyone in that top 6 that can offer them any kind of part-time spin. Kane Williamson's a very reluctant bowler when it comes to offering his services as a right-arm finger spinner. So that's going to be the challenge for New Zealand. If they were going to go with that 7 batsman option, or 6 batsmen and BJ Watling, they would need to be able to get some spin, you would think, from somewhere, and I don't think they quite have the skills for that. Of course, one option for New Zealand could have been Rachin Ravindra, the left-handed opening batsman who does provide some good finger spin option, but unfortunately he would be making his Test debut in the World Test Championship final, and I think that's maybe a bridge too far for him. So maybe in the future New Zealand might look to something like that. I don't think they'll do it for this World Test Championship final, and I think India will be likewise.
Fantastic. And before we go to predictions, I'm going to come to Adam. And Adam, how much of an advantage does New Zealand actually have, having played 2 test matches? In your view, Ravi Ashwin has come out today saying they have a bit of an advantage having played 2 test matches coming into the World Test Championship final. Do you agree with him? Do you have a different view on it? So your thoughts?
Yeah, so look, I think the typical mind games prior to a big game, always talking down your chances and talking up the opposition's chances in their preparation. Look, I think it'd be foolish to say that New Zealand haven't had the opportunity to get themselves some momentum. But we often talk about that going into a game. A lot will depend on the result of this Edgbaston test, not just in terms of whether New Zealand win the test match, but how their bowlers pull up, whether there's any injury niggles. But having been in England, I think, is going to help. Having had some experience with presumably a similar batch of Duke's cricket balls that they'll use in that World Test Championship final is also going to be a factor. But look, I think when you're talking about that really, really big game, India have certainly got some big game players. So I think that both sides will be really, really up for that contest at the Ageas Bowl.
Fantastic. Talking down our chances, not something that we're guilty of on the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast. So I'm going to come out and say that I'm backing our boys to win the World Test Championship final, the inaugural game. And guys, your predictions. Stu, perhaps you can make your prediction first. And who's winning the first WTC final?
Oh, well, I'm much like you. I wear my heart on my sleeve, and yeah, I'll be backing New Zealand all the way. Maybe it's the heart getting in the way there, but I really think that from a New Zealand point of view, playing India, it doesn't hold any mental demons or anything like that. I think if we didn't touch on New Zealand's pathway to the final, but one of our early series was going to Australia, and playing there it's just, I don't know, whenever we play Australia, we just seem to kind of freeze in the headlights, or something seems to happen. But with India, I think we've got a history of being able to win against them, particularly at home. And I mean, hopefully from our point of view, we'll get to see some similar conditions in the UK. And I think that for us to win, in my view, we probably need to bowl India out for under 300 twice. I think that's really how we do it. Probably those Southie Bolt, those seamers really just have to do the job up front, and then we just have to have all that would mean is we have to have one performance from our batting lineup and everyone else just bats around them, which is something we've been able to do quite well, just piece together a decent score. But yeah, I'm backing the Kiwis all the way.
Very good. Both teams will be looking for some redemption after 2019. Of course, New Zealand had that incredible final at Lords, and India had that game at Manchester, which was against New Zealand, which knocked us out of the World Cup. Adam, as a quasi-neutral, who do you think's taking the first ever World Test Championship final?
Yeah, look, for me, I think the toss is just going to be so important in this game. I think that, the scores absolutely decline, as they would in any test match ground. But they do get significantly lower in that third and fourth innings at the Ageas Bowl. The only caveat to that, of course, is there's only been 6 test matches played there. So the sample size isn't particularly huge. I just think India have got all of their bases covered from a bowling perspective. If they are bowling first, they've got a fantastic seam attack. GS Bowl tends to spin a little bit in the later stages of the game, but also go a little bit up and down as well. So I think they're going to have the ability to exploit that. And look, I really think that New Zealand's lack of a real frontline spinner could hinder them, particularly if they're trying to force a fourth innings victory. So as much as I hate to say it and hoping I don't get my New Zealand passport revoked, I think it will be India that are going to take this trophy for the first time.
Michael, what are your thoughts on it? Because obviously we've got 2-1 to India at the moment. Have you got a different view, or are you going with New Zealand?
Well, it's a shame that you didn't come to me before, Adam, because I had prepped and made a bunch of notes around who I think will win and why, and a lot of them are exactly the same as Adam's point. I think the toss will be vitally important. I also think that India will be best placed to bowl last on that wicket for the same reasons Adam suggested. I think if India are going to have an advantage, it is in that spin department. They've got a much better spin attack than New Zealand. But I just think that New Zealand's overall team just feels a little bit more balanced to me, and I don't think they'll fear India. And I think they're completely capable of taking 20 wickets and winning the test match. In order to do that, they're going to have to bat first and put on a big total on days 1 and 2. If New Zealand are able to do that, I think they can win and bowl India out twice.
So I'm hearing it depends from you, Michael. But
hey, New Zealand win the toss and bat. I think New Zealand will win it. I think if India win the toss, I think India are in the box seat, absolutely. But I'm going to go against the grain of New Zealanders not supporting Australia. I'm going to support New Zealand. My Antipodean brothers and sisters. I think New Zealand are going to win the test match.
Brilliant. So we've got a tie. We've got 2 against 2. This is fantastic, guys. It's going to be a great game. Thank you so much for joining us. I think from when I speak for Indian fans, I think we love playing against New Zealand because it's not like playing against England or Australia, because you almost don't mind losing to them. So if there was anyone to knock us out of the World Cup, it was New Zealand. If we lost to the West Indies, the last ICT trophy, we don't mind losing to these teams, to be honest. So it's going to be a fantastic game. Of course, we're going to be backing India all the way. And it's just going to be brilliant. So thank you so much, Stu, Adam, and Michael, for joining us on the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast. We will see which team lifts the trophy on the 22nd of June, or whether it's shared, in fact, if it's a draw. Yeah, guys. And do you want to let our listeners know where they can find your podcast and on where you guys are on social media, Stu?
Yep. So yeah, we're just called the Top Order Cricket Podcast. You can find us wherever you find podcasts, and I think we're at Top Order Pod on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the regular spots. Our social media game is a work in progress, but we're sort of much like you guys. We have a lot of chats amongst ourselves. The 4 of us that are on is sort of our regular programming, and then just try and get interviews from time to time. And a couple of recent ones we've had Ken Rutherford, Matt Henry. That New Zealand archive of players is really our base. So yeah, we'd love to have listeners from anywhere around the world.
And you guys have got an incredible catalog, so I would definitely recommend going on checking out some of those episodes. And that's the episode for the week, guys. As always, you can reach us on One Tip One Hand at Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We're also running the hashtag #BatWithSiat contest, and the question for the month of June is: which 2 Indian batsmen have scored more than 1,000 runs in the group stages of the World Test Championship? So write in with the answer to that question on Twitter with the hashtag #BatWithSiat, and we will see you on the other side of the World Test Championship final. We're also running a Twitter Spaces with the incredible Vijay Lokpalli, Bharat Sundaresan, and Bharat Ramaraj. So, guys, join that on Wednesday. It's going to be on Twitter Spaces. We'll announce on Twitter the World Test Championship final Twitter space with those guys. And all the luck to New Zealand and India for this inaugural World Test Championship final. We'll see you on the other side.